Find out the genetics explaining how hybrids between species are often sickly or sterile and how that relates to an ethically controversial episode of Star Trek Voyager, starting now. Hello, my name is Mohamed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and I'm an occasional science consultant with the Star Trek universe. I'm really excited to talk with you today about the genetic reasons that hybrids between species are often sickly or sterile. And I want to do this in the context of a controversial episode of Star Trek Voyager. We're not going to go into the ethical controversy about that. I want to stick to the science, but it's a good chance to introduce a lot of cool biology. This is going to be a slightly longer video than some of my others. I hope that's okay, but let's go ahead and dive right in. In this episode called Tuvix, Lieutenant Tuvok, who's a Vulcan, and Neelix, who's a Talaxian, were exploring a planet. When they tried to return, a transporter accident somehow fused them into one individual who was named Tuvix. The doctor says, quote, "My scans indicate that all biological matter was merged on a molecular level. Proteins, enzymes, DNA sequences. The man you see before you is literally a fusion of two men. But he's surprisingly healthy considering the circumstances." Well, let's talk about hybrids of individuals from two species and why hybrids are usually sickly or sterile. And then I'll come back to why maybe Tuvix is surprisingly healthy. But first, let me start with a quick refresher on some basic genetics. DNA. DNA is the hereditary material found in all life on Earth. Now, stretches of DNA with specific instructions are called genes. I'll come back to those in just a second. And genes are packaged together on chromosomes. We humans have 23 pairs of these chromosomes. We get one complete set of chromosomes, and therefore one copy of every gene, from our mom, and one complete set of chromosomes from our dad. And this full set of instructions across all our chromosomes is called the genome. Now, while genes have the instructions, the proteins they make are the real workhorses of your cell. They provide structure, they make sure chemical reactions are done right, and a bunch of other things too. So genes on your various chromosomes tell the cell what proteins to make and when and where to make those proteins. So let me back out of the cell for just a minute. Hybrids between species are often sterile or sickly. Now, many people think of mules as an example of a sterile hybrid offspring of horse and donkey parents, but there are a lot of other hybrids like that, like the zonkey, which is a hybrid of donkey and zebra parents, or even the hybrid plant offspring of these two rice strains. Plants matter too. Now, genetics is important for understanding what makes hybrids sterile or sickly. There's at least two general explanations for hybrid problems, and both of these involve bad interactions between the genomes of the two parent species. One set of explanations I'm going to call GENIC problems includes the idea that proteins have to work together to build things inside the animal or plant. So imagine, just as an example, that you need to build a structure in the cell with two proteins. To make it simple, let's imagine that genes on two different chromosomes each make one protein, and the two proteins have to come together to make a perfect square for that structure in your cell, so it works right. If these two pieces come together well, you're good. You're healthy, you're fertile, or whatnot. Now, over time, there could be DNA changes in the genes that alter the shape of these proteins, but the shape changes in one protein would have to be coordinated or compensated with changes in the other, so they still can work together. Now, over generations within a species, maybe the big one slowly gets smaller, but then the small one slowly gets bigger over time, and they still work well together. Now, eventually, it might be quite different from how it started, but everything is still working fine. But now in a hybrid between species that evolved in different directions, you bring together these different types, they may not work, and the hybrid could end up being sickly or sterile. Now, you might be thinking, wait, don't hybrids have a full set of genes from each of the two parent species? Well, in the first generation, basically yes. So let's imagine that the left chromosome here encodes that big piece, and the right chromosome encodes the small piece. That first generation hybrid, as you see, may still be okay, because he can still make that square structure by mixing and matching. Maybe he's just a bit slower since he's making a few different types of proteins, but, he could be okay. But hybrid problems can get worse in the next generation. Now imagine two hybrids have kids.
And some of the kids now will inherit 2 copies of the left chromosome that originally came from the red species and 2 copies of the right chromosome from the blue species. Uh-oh. They can't make the square protein, and they may end up sickly or sterile. So this kind of hybrid problem that shows up after the first generation is called hybrid breakdown. Now, this kind of hybrid problem can even happen in the first generation if you consider the X and Y chromosomes. So in mammals like us, and in fruit flies and some other species, XY individuals are male. So boys get the Y from our dads and X from our moms. Now imagine you need these 2 proteins to make a square to make good sperm. Now let's say the X makes the big one and the Y makes the small one. Well, even in a first generation hybrid between species, there'd be a problem. Now this may be part of why XY hybrids are sterile or inviable more often than XX hybrids across species. There are other reasons too that I won't go into here. Now next, I want to talk about how you can get sterility and other hybrid problems in a completely different way. And I'm going to call these chromosomal problems. So let's imagine a species with 2 chromosomes, again numbered 1 and 2. And like us, individuals of the species get 1 copy of each chromosome from each parent. If it's about to make gametes like sperm or eggs, this is done through a process that's called meiosis. The first step is to make duplicates of each copy of each chromosome like this. After it does that, the chromosomes have to be lined up with the copy that came from the other parent. That lining up is critical. Think of it like having a dancing partner, and this dance doesn't work without a partner. They then split up where 1 pair of copies of each chromosome goes one way, 1 copy goes the other way, and then they divide and split again. So from that 1 original cell, you now get 4 sperm, each one having a copy of each chromosome. Good, right? Now, imagine that you have 2 species that have some differences in their chromosomes. Maybe a difference in shape or a difference in number of chromosomes. Now let's say these species make a hybrid. The chromosomes can still double up like before, but now there's a problem. They can't line up right. There's no obvious dancing partner since the chromosomes are so different from each other. And because they can't line up, you often don't get all the right chromosome pieces into sperm. Now this may be part of the problem in mules, because horses and donkeys have different numbers of chromosomes. Well, there is a possible solution to both of these problems, and this comes under the idea of polyploidy. This is a concept I introduced in a video last month, as you see here. Now imagine that you doubled all the chromosomes. So instead of having 1 copy of each original chromosome from each parent species, imagine you had 2 copies from each parent species. Well, after they double up, each chromosome now can line up with a dancing partner and dance with a copy that came from the same original species. So sperm can now form normally because you've fixed all the chromosomal problems. And bonus, this doubling can maybe also make sure you have both types of proteins, maybe reducing GENIC problems I talked about a moment ago too. Yay! Well, this may sound weird, but this kind of doubling does happen in some hybrids. And these hybrids are called allopolyploids. So this process is very well known in plants, and it happens sometimes in some animal species too. It doesn't always work out as nicely as I described. You may still get messed up hybrids. Well, probably not this particular one. But it is a way that species hybrids can survive and thrive sometimes. So finally, let's bring this back to the Voyager episode. The doctor said Tuvix was merged and had all the DNA from both Tuvok and Neelix. So if Tuvok and Neelix had had a kid, the kid would likely get 1 copy of each chromosome from each parent, right? Like us. But since Tuvix had everything from both quote-unquote parents, he's a polyploid. And that may explain why, as the doctor noted, he's, quote, surprisingly healthy. Now, in reality, polyploidy is very rare in mammals on Earth, but these are aliens, so who knows? Maybe it's different. Anyway, even though this idea wasn't elaborated in the episode, I hope this video helps you understand the genic and chromosomal reasons that hybrids are sometimes sterile or sickly, and how some kinds of hybrids get around that problem.
Had you heard of allopolyploids before? And what do you think of the cool genic and chromosomal reasons for why hybrids can be sterile? And should Janeway have killed Tuvix? Don't touch that last one, but let us know about the rest in the comments, and thank you for tuning into BioTrekkie Explains. See you next time.